You're listening to the Getting Social podcast, a keep it real type podcast where we discuss entrepreneurship, marketing, and all kinds of social topics. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Getting Social podcast. I am your host, Jeff Policard, and this is episode number 23. The human body is an amazing machine. It really wants to function at its peak capacity. But how can we maximize its full potential to live better, smarter, and healthier? These are questions we should all be asking ourselves. Most importantly, these are questions we should seek to find answers for. In this episode, we talk to Doctor Extraordinaire, Thierry Jacquemin, and we get to discuss some topics that are very important to all of us. From time and stress management to eating right and exercising regularly, the blueprint is laid out right in front of us, but why is it so hard to implement? What about the water we drink here in the United States? The hormones, toxins, and antibiotics found in our foods? How is that impeding our efforts to get healthy? When you talk all of that with our obsession to be supermen and superwomen by being productive all the time, it's a lot to digest. Pun always intended. Without further ado, it's time to get social.
You're right, Doc. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I call you Doc because you actually are my doctor too now. So I'll make sure to take it easy on you so you can take it easy on me. So anyway, my first question for you is why? Why did you decide to become a doctor? Take us through the journey and what happened leading to the excellent doctor that you are today.
Well, the 2-minute version of that is actually very simple. I have absolutely nobody medical in the family. In fact, most of my family members will straight up pass out at the sight of a drop of blood, right? But it's very simple. I was an athlete growing up. I was always around sports and one way or another, always around orthopedists. My brother tore his ACL during a soccer game where we played on the same squad. And I basically had to follow him through the journey of see the surgeon, see the therapist, take off stitches, deal with pain, go back and forth, where he was basically an invalid, for some stretch that I had to help take care of him to, back to full function, kicking ass and everything else. And up to that moment, I literally had no inclination to do anything medical, had never even crossed my mind because, there's definitely no influence in the family. And from that moment on, I was hooked, man. I just thought wow, what a cool way to spend, my life and to make a living, to make other people better. I know it sounds super corny, but it's the absolute truth,
I believe you. And it's important, man. I think it's important to have passion, and that's where your passion comes from, helping people. From there, you develop, skills maybe you didn't know that you had in the past, and you find your true mission in life. And I think that's something that a lot of people unfortunately do not get to, and the fact that you're getting to that is awesome.
Yeah, it's a big thing, It's a big thing, It's that concept that look, you're gonna whatever it is that you're gonna do for a living, you're gonna probably do a lot of it for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And you better really, really get jazzed up about it when you wake up in the morning, because number one, you're gonna do a far better job than if you're just putting in average effort for something that you barely care about.
Absolutely,
but you're gonna do it way longer. You're just gonna be much, much more efficient at it, I think.
Absolutely, man. And this is something that I've repeated many times before, and it's from Charles Barkley. He said something once that he never worked a day in his life. Obviously he takes it to a far extreme, but I believe him. And most people that know him actually believe him because his passion is basketball. It's always been basketball. He obviously played a lot of basketball, and now he's commenting and getting paid millions to comment on basketball games, and
I know.
He enjoys it. So, man, it's something I enjoy marketing a lot, you know what I mean? But honestly, I think there's another level that maybe I haven't reached yet. We'll see.
It's about time. Sometimes it's about circumstance, and it's about sort of like where one meets the other and they intersect sometimes, But once you find that, man, like you wake up, that saying that Eric Thomas likes to say all the time, right? Like no alarm clock needed, like I believe that. I believe that. I live that.
I believe it too, man. It's there. And there's a lot of days I feel that way too, I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy helping people too, because that's what it is in essence.
Absolutely.
But there's something, I feel like there's still something missing, because deep down, I really want to help people on a deeper level. This is something that I've always said. I told my wife this story many times, close friends and stuff. I said, if my ultimate fantasy really is to be a superhero and not for all the bells and whistles, is literally just to try the best that I can to make the world as fair as possible and help people as much as possible.
Interesting.
So maybe one day I will find a way to become an actual superhero. So we'll see.
Well, listen, you're a dad, So in my book, that's as am I. So for me, we're the real superheroes.
Hey, I like that. I love that. That's true. I'm a superhero to my kids, and that's all that really matters, right?
That's right. Exactly.
I love that. Exactly. Man. Great perspective. But now let's talk to us about the 5 languages that you speak. How did you come about? I know most of them are romantic languages, so they have a lot in common. Right. But obviously, when you add English to the mix, but how did you come about, learning 5 languages fluently?
So, I wish that I could take credit as part of this like amazing intelligence that I would supposedly possess. The reality is that this is pretty much all like happenstance, right? So I'm a French, like family's French, but part Italian. But I was born and raised in Brazil, right?
Wow.
So right off the bat, 3 things were thrown at me at the same time, right? So we lived in Brazil, so obviously I had to learn the mother tongue. My dad was like a very staunch Frenchman. And so it didn't matter who we bring at home. And, it didn't matter if they were Brazilian. Like if you were in his house, you had to speak French. And our friends also did, so they had to learn. So, and then there go Italian, right? And then, later teenage years, we moved to the US, and then it's like, okay, well, I guess I got to learn this English situation, right? So got to work on that, and then came to Miami of all places. So I thought, okay, well, English is only going to help me marginally here. I better learn some Spanish. So that's how five came about. If I had to devote some of my adult time now to say, okay, like I'm gonna learn like a foreign language right now in adulthood, like I'm fairly sure I would jump off a building,
Yeah, that's my struggle right now with Spanish, man. This is and I speak French, and it's supposed to be easier for us because there's a lot of similarities, but I've been in the States for so long now, and that even if French, I spoke French for most of my life, but if you think about it, I've been in the States for 20 years. Actually, it's all of my adult life, and I think in English, and I think that's the problem. When you think in French, when I think in French, or I force myself to think in French to translate, then it's easier. But whenever I think in English prior to, trying my best to say anything in Spanish, then I mess up completely. But I have no excuse.
I believe it.
I have no excuse. I have to do better. My wife is Cuban, and her parents speak Spanish. Her mom barely speaks English. I'm never really able to communicate with her, and so it's gonna have to be something that I do something about, So hopefully I don't jump off a building.
Well, some cynics might consider it a blessing not to be able to communicate too much with your mother-in-law.
Well, you are in the health business for a reason.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Now, speaking of health business, tell us a little bit more about your specialty. What do you specialize in? I know you specialize in multiple areas, but what is your bread and butter, and why did you choose it to be that?
So I'm an internist by training, right? So an internist is, the training is fairly broad. The standard training for internists has to do primarily with taking care of sick adults in the hospital, right?
Hmm.
I don't do so much of that anymore. I've transitioned sort of out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bulk of what I do these days, the bread and butter, so to speak, is wellness and anti-aging, right? So the idea being, this anti-aging term gets thrown around a lot, and it has a lot of different meaning for different people. The whole idea is, how do I extract more out of myself? How do I make myself better? How do I make myself smarter? How do I make myself fitter? And how do I do all of that for longer, right? So the idea being, well, let's sort of kick butt for as long as we possibly can, right? That's the whole point. That's how I run my practice. And that's how I try to live my own life,
Yeah, I think you said that also, that you actually, you fully epitomize your motto: live better, smarter, and longer. But we're going to need a little bit more detail from you, because I know that there's a lot of people that want to know, how the hell do we do that? That's my question, and that's the reason why I came to see you in the first place. And I'm sure that's the question that many of us, obviously there's not a direct answer to that, but if you were to design some sort of short, quick, and easy, I would say maybe routine, if you will, for us to be the best versions of ourselves, what would it look like?
Your time, right? So the let's face it, right? Time is the most valuable resource that we have, right? Like nothing else matters quite as much as time, because it's the only thing that fundamentally you really can't replace, right? So the focus has to be on efficiency. The focus has to be sort of on this very delicate balance of, how do I care for myself? How do I care for those I love? And then how do I care for those whose impact I can actually, sort of make a dent, right? So like in terms of like, who can you actually impact? And the thing is, cliche as that may sound, the reality is you can't do anything for other people until you're doing it for yourself, right? Now, don't misunderstand, like the idea, and I think some people have gone too far in that direction, in the direction of self-indulgence. We're certainly not talking about self-indulgence. We're talking about self-care. So how do I optimize my day from morning to night? If you take stock of how most people live their lives, and we're all guilty of it at different times. Some people are guiltier than others, but fundamentally, right, there's a lot of time wasted, right? And so, people that are telling you, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. If you really sit and take a log of their time and how they're spending it, you realize that there's actually a lot more available time in a day than everybody needs. So you need some time for yourself. You need some time for your brain to recharge. You need some time to learn new information, to sort of, feed your mind, so to speak. Then you have to move your body, preferably every day, doing something that's hard enough that you challenge yourself. Ideally, learn a new skill. Feed your machine, right? So feed your body properly. And, considering that we live in the United States, you would think that would be an easy task, but actually it turns out a lot harder to do that in this country, I think, than in a lot of other places in the world, strangely enough,
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because it is a lot more difficult here. It's not, the system here is not designed to allow us really to fully, what's the word I'm looking for here? Fully be healthy.
No.
And I remember during our visit, we spoke a little bit about that also, about stress levels, about how your body is not designed to sustain that level of stress continuously. It's not even, sporadically. It's basically there at all times. So what would you say to that? Like, where do you see us as far as human beings, and as far as healthy human beings, with that constant pressure that never seems to go away?
So, human beings are interesting creatures, right? Because we have unlimited potential, but at the same time, we are the most perfectly built self-destruction machines, right? So we sort of have this, this resourcefulness and intelligence that obviously makes us a lot more adept at pretty much everything than, all other animals. But at the same time, if you leave us to our own devices, we're very, very quick to basically just destroy everything and ourselves in the process, right? And so this idea of stress gets thrown around a lot, and in a lot of ways gets misunderstood. So we're never talking about the idea that all stress is bad. That's not true, right? Like take it at the very basis of that. The hormone, the sort of like the main stress hormone in the body, cortisol. And people say, oh, cortisol's bad, cortisol's bad. Sure, it's bad. We're going to talk about that in a second. But if you wake up and you have zero cortisol, guess what? You're going to die, right? So you do need a certain amount of stress. But so the interesting thing is human beings are amazing at dealing with acute episodes of stress. So we're talking about fight or flight, right? You're in the jungle, you wake up, there's a lion, you have to hide, you have to jump, you have to fight for your life. You have to think when you're in a rough situation in the middle of a meeting and you have a presentation, like that type of stuff. We do a really good job. Our brains are designed for that. Our physiology is designed for that. What we're not designed to do is have this constant trickle of cortisol in our bloodstream. And unfortunately, as a society, without getting too crazy in, corporate this and corporate that, but let's face it, we've become sort of enslaved to productivity. I myself am the same, even though I work completely for myself, but I'm sort of enslaved to it in some ways, and we all can fall prey to it. And so that constant cortisol little surge, that constant little uptick of cortisol, we're not very adept to dealing with that. So the end result of that is a bunch of chronic medical problems, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, all these things that come about from just this chronic upsurge of cortisol that just goes unchecked, basically,
Yeah, I remember that. I definitely remember that. And it does make sense. It makes sense that, and that's how I remember it now. Obviously, when you say it again, that you need a little bit of it. It's necessary, almost just like anything. It's just basically balance. But what we're having here is constant, and that's where it gets dangerous. And I think, even this year with how it's passed so far, how it's going, and who knows what 2021 is going to bring. Obviously I'm very optimistic about it. I approach every year like this the same way, however bad or quote unquote bad, because it's not bad until, you really go through extremely hard times. I mean, we're going all through hard times now, but we're talking right now. We are on a podcast. We're breathing, we're eating, we have a roof over our heads, we're healthy, and our families are healthy. And what else could you ask for? If one thing that it taught me in 2020 is exactly that, is like, man, we take so many things for granted. Like I threw away a bunch of my clothes, a bunch of my stuff. Like I don't really need all that stuff,
I know.
And we should be thankful for that, and hopefully that is also what goes through the minds of most people approaching 2021. And I think that will also help alleviate some stress, because you said something that we're enslaved to productivity. And I'm like, man, that's not even, that's taking it to another level, because you're not even saying we're enslaved to our jobs or to our responsibilities. We're enslaved to productivity. That's taking it to another level, because we are actually assigning ourselves as much work as possible so you can be competitive, so we can be the smarter, the faster, the better looking, the fitter in every possible scenario.
Yep.
And it's not supposed to be that way. The balance is the beauty of who we are. So we also spoke about water, the water that we drink here in the States, and also not only the quality of the water, but also the quality of the foods that we eat here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Tell us, what are we doing wrong, or what can we do to make it right in some way?
Man, this is such a big deal, and it goes to levels that are so deep and so dark that the reality is most people don't realize that, right? So I'll give you a perfect example as a short story. I have a lot of my patients are international, right? Because obviously I'm international, so I seem to attract that crowd a little bit. And so not a week goes by that I don't have a new patient from another country or new family, whatever the case may be, and they come see me. And they tell me the same story, right? They say, look, we got here as a family and we've always eaten healthy and we cook at home and we're eating the same thing we were eating in so-and-so country. And the story applies to a bunch of countries, right? And they tell me, we don't get it. Like, it's 6 months later and all of us have gained, 6 pounds. Like, what's going on here? Like, the portions are the same. Everything looks the same. And basically I have to take stock, take a step back and say, guess what? What you're consuming looks like it's the same, but it's mostly devoid of nutrients and filled with more useless calories, hormones, and antibiotics than you can ever have dreamed possible, right?
Wow.
So when and I say that, I've been, obviously, like, I'm a foreigner, but I've been in the U.S. for 30 years, and I'm deeply grateful for the life that this country has given me, and all of that. But the reality is, what we're doing to the food supply, to the water supply, and so on in this country may not have been intentional at the outset, but it's just downright criminal, man.
Yep.
I mean, food is laced with hormones, with antibiotics, with you name it, right? With toxins, with inappropriately high levels of toxic metals. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm a big coffee person, right? And the quality of coffee beans, for example, that, there's a certain threshold, right, for the amount of toxins that are allowed per unit and so on and so forth. And so obviously you might argue, well, that the only acceptable number should be 0 for these toxins worldwide. But unfortunately, it isn't like that, right? There are agricultural standards and so on. Bottom line is, if you just take the example of coffee alone, the quality of the coffee beans that are allowed in this country, for example, would never be allowed in France, in Italy, and a bunch of other countries, right? But somehow in the United States, a country with all these resources, we're saying, yeah, sure, send it over here. We'll figure out something to do with it, And so that happens with food at many different levels. It happens certainly with agriculture and so on. And then the water, right? Like the water supply has been tested like all over the country. And, there's, like inappropriately high levels of all sorts of things. They found, detectable levels of, different antidepressants in the water, hormones, all this other stuff. And this, people hear that sometimes and they think, oh, well, look at this, like a conspiracy. I'm the furthest thing from a conspiracy person in the planet. I promise you, right? But you know what I am?
Thanks for clarifying
data driven, right?
If
there's a study and there's and show me the evidence. If there's evidence, like, you can't refute the evidence. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not telling you some random thing that, Napoleon is coming back to, poison us all. I'm saying, just look, that this stuff is well published, and in the meantime, we're suffering.
Yeah, man. That's a lot. That's a lot to digest. No pun intended.
Literally.
But woof, man. So, because it's true, man. It's like, it's been difficult for me in this past year. I started off the year very well, I'm talking about healthy habits wise.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to blame the pandemic or anything like that for my struggles, with my health and my weight. And I'm not even talking about a huge amount. It's just like I was on my way back down to being, somewhat fit again, and I let myself go, and I've tried, man. I've tried. I told you about I've tried vegan. My wife put me on vegan, and she also put me into the keto diet, which I did for a full month. I did notice a difference for a little bit, but after that, it leveled out, and then that's it. I was not losing anything. And even though when I paired it with exercising, obviously there's a lot of me not being consistent enough also that contributes to the results. But
for sure,
with the amount of things that I tried, and also even for sustainable periods of time, like for example, the keto thing, I was very serious for a full month. It's not a lot, but usually, maybe it's aging. Usually when I used to do that back in the day with good exercise, I noticed a big difference after a month. This time around, I lost like 3 or 4 pounds, and it's the same 3 or 4 pounds that I had lost on week 1,
Right.
So,
right.
So I struggle with that, man. It's like, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people on the same boat struggling with that, with the consistency, with what kind of foods to eat. I know you spoke about a couple of other things that we could do in order for us to to be healthier. For example, managing our time, which is something that we take for granted also. A lot of people say we don't have time. You just make the time. The time is there. When you look at what they're doing and what they're using their time for, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes, it's like, man, no, man, you have the time. You just have to be more productive and you just have to plan more, so taking that into consideration, obviously, is there such a thing as like a crash course to be on a healthier path, or to have like to notice a great change in as little as 30 to 45 days, for example?
No question, no question that you can do a lot with you can do a lot in a short period of time, right? So I tell people this all the time. The human body is an amazing machine in the sense that it really truly wants to function at its peak capacity, right? It's not asking for that much. It's asking that we move a little. It's asking that we don't force feed it all garbage, right? Think of like on a daily basis, right? Like the amount of stuff, if you really sit and think about it, most of us, even those of us who really try hard, and by no means am I claiming to be perfect at this, right? I mean, I try really hard, but still, trust me, right? Sometimes you have cotton candy and tequila like everybody, right? But the whole point is, think of how much we're actually digesting day to day that isn't really actual food, right? Like we're consuming all this processed stuff, and still our bodies keep marching along and they keep doing our best. They keep sending us warnings like, look, this is hurting after I eat this. That's your body telling you, listen, you may not want to do this for 10 years because at some point we're going to have a problem, And yet, we're able to continue. But it's also very easy to turn it around, right? So it's a lot more about what we call your metabolic health than anything. So it's been said before. I take no responsibility for the quote, although I really like it. But you're only as good physiologically as your last meal, right? Meaning that you can change how you're feeling. You can change how your brain is functioning in a span of a few hours, right? So you've just eaten a bad meal, fine, cut that off, you're done, move past it, figure it out, take a few hours, let that digest, maybe go for a walk, and guess what? Your next meal, you have something great, you have something that's healthy for you, that isn't filled with a bunch of toxins. Immediately, I guarantee you're going to start feeling a little sparkle, like your cells are going to all of a sudden say, this is interesting. This is not like an actual insult. We can actually do something with this clean, usable energy. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that if you just, go from one meal to another, that you're going to magically have a six-pack and be perfect, right? That's not what we're talking about. But if only it were that easy, right?
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that first step, that first change matters, and it's really, really fast. And then you go through something like even like a 30-day challenge or like a 30-day detox, where you're not really doing anything crazy, but just maybe saying for 30 days I'm not going to have processed food, right? Just do that, or for 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. And you're going to notice that your brain is going to function better, that you're going to make better decisions, that you're going to drop a little bit of weight, you're going to have a little more energy. And so now you're building more momentum, right? Because now you're more likely to exercise if you're doing that stuff correctly, instead of saying, well, I've just eaten 9 slices of pizza. You're not going to work out after that, No, so it's almost like every little bit, right? Like every little bit takes you in the right direction, and it's not hard to do. It's not hard to kind of break that chain. And then the idea after that is just to sustain it, to sustain some semblance of a routine,
Man, what really stuck with me here is that, you're only as good as your last meal.
Yeah.
And if you break it down to that level, meal per meal like that, you say don't be too hard on yourself. Because here's the thing, this is why it stuck with me. Because I tend to, for example, and I think it's proven that it does happen to basically everyone. That's what sugar does. It's basically a drug. You can't,
Totally.
You start having sugar in the morning. You have pancakes with a ton of syrup. Not that I don't eat pancakes, but I just use that example because my kids love pancakes. I'm like, so pancake with a ton of syrup and sugars and stuff like that. you set the tone for the rest of the day because your body is craving that same exact type of meal throughout the day.
No question.
So that's why what you said is so important. It makes it's challenging, but if you can change your mindset, where it's like, you know what, I had a very bad breakfast. I'm gonna make it a point to eat, I don't know, blank for lunch.
Yeah.
Now, I'll use that blank and hoping that you can help me fill in that blank. If you were, for example, to pick the safest possible food, obviously, just your opinion. Let's say for lunch, like an option that you could take that is going to be safe. I have something in my mind. I want to see what you have in your mind.
Of course. So if I'm going to choose, and I apologize if I offend some vegetarians out there, but if I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose a nice piece of grass-fed steak, some vegetables that are at a minimum organic, preferably that have been, grown and picked locally without a bunch of crap added onto it. And maybe some other starch like a sweet potato or something like that. Still organic, still, properly sourced, not, nothing that's been handled by too many companies and processed and sprayed with too much stuff. Like for me, if you give me the choice, that's what I'm going with every single time,
Now, the steak that you mentioned, if it's grass-fed, obviously, and pure organic, it's great for you, isn't it? With the
absolutely.
Veggies. All right,
absolutely.
Good. I like that option.
And so, we've dealt with that. We've dealt with there's still a lot of that floating around. I still have, believe it or not, this argument with plenty of my own colleagues. And they'll tell you, be careful because, meat's bad. We're like, okay, well, let's step on the brakes and say, well, what are we talking about when we say meat, right? Like, because red meat means a lot of things for a lot of people. Like, are we talking about, processed cured sausage? Are we talking about steak? If we're talking about steak, what kind of an animal was this? Was this an animal that was fed corn and tortured and, grew up in a cage? Was this an animal that was, roaming around free eating grass, not corn? And, the studies show, I mean, if you look at, for example, the fatty acid profile for grass-fed meat, right? Red meat. Well, guess what? The fatty acid profile of those is actually very similar to salmon and other types of fish, where we think, oh, well, that's really good for your health, right? On the other hand, if you're going to eat it off some animal that was beaten, abused, and ate all the wrong things, the fatty acid profile is completely different. So we're comparing very, very different things when we make a blanket statement like meat's bad for you. The same goes for fish. The same goes for anything. You say, oh, salmon's good for your heart. Which kind of salmon, right? I mean, is this, salmon that was farmed that has ridiculous levels of arsenic and toxic metals? Are we talking about, sockeye salmon that's been, that lived the life of a proper salmon and then got, who knows, right? And so until you make those distinctions, and the thing is, people find it exhausting because you literally have to have this elaborate questionnaire with every single piece of thing that you consume, particularly in this country,
Well, yeah, if you think about this that way, it means that also eating out, that's why eating out is it's so bad, if you do it consistently, because you'll really never know what you're eating, what kind of salmon you're eating, what kind of, steak, I guess you can know if you ask or whatever, but a lot of times you don't really know what's in the food.
You really don't. You don't know what it is. You don't know the source. You don't know how it's been prepared. You don't know how it's been marinated. You really don't know. I mean, obviously we're in an age where some places are a lot more open-minded. Some places, to their credit, are definitely making an effort to sort of, try to adapt to the times. And so some places are pretty welcoming to questions and so on and so forth. And at the same, I mean, obviously we all go out to eat, right? But like at some point it can get fairly exhausting, right? If every piece of thing on the menu, you're like, well, what's this? What's that? Where did this meat grow up?
Yeah.
Where did this animal come from? What was his name? Who were his parents? Like it never ends,
it becomes exhausting. And that's why I'm going to try, one of the first things I'm going to try to do, and that's why I asked this question, is also for me, because I try to have healthier lunches. So I try to get like salad wraps, but I choose the spinach wrap instead. And I read that it's better, and I fill it with what do you call that? Spinach, avocado, some other veggies, and usually some chicken or salmon.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a difference when I eat it like that. Because what I notice is that by 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm hungry again, but it's a good hungry. I'm never bloated. When I eat a heavier lunch, sandwich or bread or anything like that, that's heavy, then I'm not necessarily hungry almost for the entire day until 9 p.m. Like it hits me and I'm like, man, now I'm hungry, but I'm craving the same bad lunch that I had,
Right. Of course.
Terrible.
Because you're on the, that's the roller coaster.
Yeah. But when I do eat healthier, I eat the wraps or something like that. When I come home, I'm fine. I eat something healthier to follow it, and because I'm not really craving that bad food,
Yeah.
But yeah, man, a lot of work to be done here. A lot of work to be done. And speaking of all of that, I want to talk a little bit about your new program, your VIP concierge service that you're starting in 2021. I know you said the way you're describing it, that's like, man, this is the best way to start the new year. I know a lot of people do that. They put it as resolution number 1 and it's out the door very easily. So I'm sure this, will help you stay on track, and like you said, to skyrocket your health, wellness, productivity, and longevity. Tell us a little bit more about the program and how we could benefit from it.
So I'm gonna start that with a brief somber note on healthcare, and then we're gonna move on to something better, right? So healthcare, as most people know it, not just in the U.S. but in general, healthcare is broken, right? Healthcare is essentially nothing more than a reactive process where we're reacting to symptoms and hoping to patch them up with a pill or a medication, right? Nothing more than that. Even when we talk about prevention, to most doctors. Let's use an example. Let's use breast cancer as an example. You talk to most docs and you ask them, what's breast cancer prevention mean to you? And they're going to say, oh, well, you have your mammogram every year or two and you catch it early and you do something about it, right? Well, guess what, right? That's not prevention at all. Oh, that's detection, right? Sure, you're detecting, and maybe possibly people do a little bit better with that. But remember, now in the process of this supposed detection, now you're exposing people to radiation every year, right? So the radiation alone isn't completely benign to your DNA and your cells, right? At no point, most of my colleagues, at no point are they going to say, well, prevention is, let's study what actually causes this disease and let's try to implement things to actually prevent those cancer cells from growing and multiplying in the first place, right? And so that argument is against everything else. I've been criticized by some people when I say, look, type 2 diabetes for a lot of people is not something that you manage or that you treat. It's something that you can eradicate, something that you can fix and you make it go away. But that takes significant changes in lifestyle and that takes significant changes in nutrition, right? Most people don't want to hear that. Most of my colleagues for sure don't want to hear that. And the reality is a lot of patients aren't willing to hear that either. They just say, well, this is the disease and the label that I've been given. Give me the pills, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem is that, nobody's born with a deficiency in a certain pill. Like, I don't care what that pill is, right? Nobody's born with the Zoloft deficiency, right? Like the whole idea is to say, well, let's try to find the root cause of this problem. And this is where I feel that medicine has and continues to fail most people. So I have the great fortune that the practice has grown to an extent that it keeps me like crazy busy. And, we work obviously with, like a lot of insurance plans and all this other stuff. But my vision for what we're going to be rolling out this year is we're going to do it as sort of like as a test group of really motivated people. We're going to offer basically a package where you're on a membership plan. A membership plan gives you accountability. It gives you access day to day to me, right? So people are going to have my personal cell phone. They're going to be able to call me, to text me at any time. Obviously, they'll be given, fast appointments and so on. And more importantly, even than all of that, is we're going to have a very, very elaborate, at least once yearly, probably twice yearly, plan with a lot of advanced diagnostic testing. So we're going to do genetic testing. We're going to do cancer markers. We're going to look at the length of telomeres, which are the little protective caps of your DNA. So, the length of those sequences sort of like allows you to tell how resilient an organism is, and more importantly, what you do to sort of get that better, whether it be with vitamins, whether it be with nutrition, and whether it be with lifestyle and so on. And so the problem and the reality that a lot of people don't want to face is that, your basic regular insurance plans are not designed for that, right? So that comes as an extra cost, right? And so not everyone is willing, not everybody is able. The reality is a lot of it really just comes down to how you prioritize your health, right? Because a lot of people are going to say, well, I can't do it, but, because my insurance takes care of it. But trust me, if your insurance is giving you something for $10, chances are, all they're really trying to do is to keep you alive, right? They're not really, your insurance plan isn't terribly concerned with getting you to be more functional, leaner, better, smarter, all of that stuff that we talk about. Mm-hmm. It's not their concern. Their concern is, let me just keep this person alive a little longer, right? Mm-hmm. And so, because they're trying to do it on a mass scale. And so we're trying to sort of take that away. So people will still be able to use their insurance plans for diagnostics as much as possible, but we're going to sort of offer this as a test group. We're still working out some of the kinks and some of the details of how we're going to do that, and making sure that I don't have a mental breakdown in the process. But because that's going to be a lot of people, more than it already is, right?
Yeah.
Messaging me and having access to me constantly. But I'm really, really excited to see what that's going to do to the health of those people, because those are things we can quantify. We're going to get all these baseline markers at baseline, right, at the outset, and we're going to see, well, what kind of beneficial effects is this plan having on people over 3 months, 6 months, a year, and beyond,
So it's just basically a preventive medicine package. I mean, that's just me calling it the way I want it to go. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, so that's going to be the core of it. But more than that, it's going to be this idea that the proper way to care for your health is not with the old model of you have a symptom, you go see the all-knowing doctor, and then they give you the pill, and then you don't question it. The idea is to say, well, with this constant communication, let's have like a real partnership, right? Mm-hmm. So the partnership of saying, listen, I heard about this. What do you think? What about what we consider this? What about what we consider that? This testing, this prevention, this nutritional style, like all this other stuff, to really, truly see if we personalize it, like really personalize it, what's going to come out on the other end. I have a funny feeling it's going to come out with a lot better people and a lot healthier people,
Man, that's great, man. That's an awesome plan, honestly, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. 2021 is a big year for us. It's a redemption year for a lot of us, and also a year that will present a lot of opportunities. And if we're not operating on all cylinders, if we're not capable of sustaining a certain level of energy or burning a certain level of energy, and sustaining efficiency and passion and all those good things that are required for us to really succeed. And also, all of it is basically, boils down to health. Once you're healthy, you can have all of these things. If you're not, it will be very challenging to do it. So
no question.
But Doc, thank you so much, man. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I knew it.
Here.
That we were going to get a lot. I asked a lot of the questions that I wanted answers for my own self. So hopefully, hopefully my audience is appreciative of that also. But if they want to reach out to you and also ask you questions about the potential, I know it's a special VIP plan. and you're not going to be able to, have obviously 10,000 people messaging you on a daily basis. But if anybody wants to get a hold of you and check you out, how do they do that?
So the handle is always the same on all social media. So it's Dr. Dr. And then my full name, Thierry Jacquemin, Thierry Jacquemin at everything, meaning that's the handle on Instagram, that's the Facebook, that's on LinkedIn. You can send messages. I respond myself. I'm still not at the mental breakdown level, so I'm still doing that stuff myself, just because I like it better that way, right? Like nice. I want to have that connection with people. I want to know what people are thinking, what people like, what people don't like, even about about the content that I post and everything else. So send me a message. If it takes, a couple of hours, don't get upset, but I'm going to answer. I literally have people that are like an hour. I sent you a message an hour ago. I can't believe you never responded.
Wow.
It's like an hour, man. Just give me a minute,
This is crazy.
But I will get to it, and then we'll find out more. I'll be posting more stuff on all of that. And in addition to all the health stuff that I'm posting currently, but we're going to be the closer we get to end of December, the more we're going to be ironing out some of those details that we're going forward with. So I'm really, really excited about it.
Same here, man. And you say an hour. Me, I you're nice. I'm like, it's only been 2 days. Can you chill for a little bit? Anyway, Doc, thanks again, man. We'll make sure to leave your information in the notes also for people to find you.
Perfect.
It's been a pleasure, like I said, and we'll talk soon for sure.
Same here. We'll talk soon, my brother. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Getting Social podcast. If you've made it that far, it means you probably liked it. In that case, leave us a review, subscribe, and please share it with a friend.